Welcome to the Jeffers Brief, only on Contra Radio Network.
Hello, intelligentsia. John Jeffers here of the Jeffers Brief. Welcome to another week. Oh, where do we start? You know what? You preppers out there, intelligentsia, pay attention. Look, you may not consider yourself a prepper, and that's fine. But we saw what happened last year for people who aren't preppers. First of all, they went crazy. They gotta get toilet paper. It's like, really? Okay. Because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to get. And I did get a message from an older gentleman who says, I hate preppers. I said, why? Why do you hate preppers? Well, they come in and take everything at the last minute. I said, that's not true. See, preppers plan ahead. So what you're seeing are not preppers. What you're seeing and experiencing are people who failed to prep. And, yeah, he didn't like that answer. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not here. I'm not here to bullshit you. And I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. You know, a little adage, and I like to use this because some people say, John, you're such an asshole. Yeah, okay. Maybe I am. I agree. Maybe I am. But the fact is this. Only your true friends will tell you things you don't want to hear. So if you want people to sit there and kiss your ass and feel sorry for you, or tell you what you want to hear and make you feel better, well, maybe you might want to consider getting new friends. Because your true friends are not only going to tell you what you don't want to hear, they will help you bury the bodies. That's true. All right. I want to talk to you today about a little interesting subject that concerns you preppers. And probably ladies. Oh, by the way, I am so glad to see that our listening audience is increasing with the addition of more women preppers. I am. I truly am. So thank you, ladies, for listening and tuning in. I hope you take something away from this. Now, one thing I want you to know is this. I am not going to tell you what you need to do. I'm just going to put the information out there. I've said this since 2014 when I first started doing this. You decide what to do with that information. Put it into action, put it aside for later consumption, or ignore it entirely. I mean, it's up to you. I'm just putting it out there. And welcome listeners around the world. You know, it's just kind of interesting. Some of our listenership, our downloads, are not only growing in the United States, but it's growing around the planet. So with that, I think, we've all been fatigued. I mean, I guess the CDC is going to come out with new mask guidelines for shit that doesn't work. They want you to wear a mask outside, too. Yeah. Are you freaking kidding me? Look, I'm not telling you to get vaccinated. I'm not telling you to get vaccinated. That's a personal decision that you have to make for yourself and or your loved ones. I'm not telling you one thing or the other. I'm not. But I would think if you're vaccinated, you don't need to worry about wearing a freaking mask. What the hell, man? At some point in time, well, no, it's not true. We've got too many sheeple in this country. You don't believe me? How many videos have you seen of the Kyles and Karens out there? You took your mask off outside. Well, yeah. I did. The government said not to. Well, you know what? You're not supposed to like your government, and you're supposed to question it. I remember back in the 70s and 80s, it was the liberal saying, question authority. Well, now it's follow the science. Okay, fuck both of you. You know what? Go to hell. Do what you need to do. All right. I'm sorry, I'm just losing it. And it's a consequence of mental fatigue in a slow burning crisis, which is what this is. And and in some respects, it's a manufactured crisis at this point in time. Now, the Organic Prepper, thank you for this article. I appreciate it. I find it very interesting because it affects everything and everybody. Even in a grid down situation, this is going to affect you. And Toby Cowan, thank you. Thank you so much for this article. Now, we're going to introduce you to one effect of the mental fatigue known as PLOMS. P-L-O-M-S. It's not that nice, juicy red fruit we all like. Now, in some situations, this can have serious consequences. Taking action, making decisions is key in prepping your group or family unit safe and secure. Fatigue management is one of the most neglected preps. Mental fatigue is especially present in a slow-burning crisis. Like I said, it's like the ones we're dealing with right now. And at this point, it's manufactured. Every time we turn on the news, they're stoking that fire of panic. Oh, we gotta do this. We gotta wear the mask. You know, okay, here's a question for you. If masks work and vaccines work, why are we still having new COVID cases? Yeah, okay, whatever. So, the isolation, increased financial problems, and stress of this pandemic and the response to it have caused quite a lot of people to struggle with their mental health and well-being. Now, you need to refer and hold yourself to a AAA standard for what I'm going to share with you today. So what is the AAA standard? Accessible, affordable, actionable. And we strive for that with everything we do. And there's always something you can do to improve your chances of a better outcome. Now, Toby talks about his nan. He says, I was introduced to the concept of PLOMS by my nan when I was very little. My nan was of the Second World War fighting generation, as was my granddad. My nan stands at 4'11", so I stood a head and shoulders above her as a teenager. Still, you did not want to mess with her. She was the first fierce woman I ever encountered in my life, and she knew how to own a situation. One day, as a sort of slovenly youth of 11 or 12 years old, I moped about something. And I remember getting grabbed and pinned up against the wall by this mighty midget. She said to me, don't you get PLOMS? You're saying, John, what in the hell is PLOMS? Well, I'm going to tell you. PLOMS is an acronym. It stands for Poor Little Old Me Syndrome. And quite simply, in her generation, nothing good could come from feeling sorry for yourself. You either snapped out of it or it got slapped out of it. Those are your two escalation levels. Either somebody grabs you and shakes you and says, stop it, or if you didn't work, or if that didn't work, you get a wallop. Now, mental fatigue, known as PLOMS, still exists, but the world has moved on. There's an exceptionally more sensitive population now. Oh, God. Typically participating in the Victim Olympics. Yes, the Victim Olympics. Speaking of Victim Olympics, you know, here in Chicago, every weekend we have to listen to the news. Oh, so many people were shot this weekend. Yeah, well, you know what? This weekend is no different than any other weekend. And I got to tell you, I think they're talking about like 23 people last weekend were shot in Chicago. Not one, by the way, by the Chicago Police Department or any member thereof. Yeah. Yeah. Police are just gunning people down they're just mowing them down. Okay. And then of course we have to get on TV. We put the cameras in their face, and we have the starting gun of the Victim Olympics. Now there is a massive empowerment in being a victim. Therefore, people are very reluctant to move out of that victim dynamic. When they drop into ploms, it's easy and, dare I say, highly desirable to stay there. The snap or slap is no longer effective. As the fatigue of the pandemic continues to bite us in the ass, we're seeing people jaded and frayed. People are struggling and apathetic and hard to motivate. And that is entirely normal and perfectly understandable. But what that is a compromise. It's a compromise to operational effectiveness. So when you start to get its people struggling to fulfill the fundamental roles due to lack of motivation or self-pity, for example, ploms, well, we all get overwhelmed during long-term stressful situations, every single one of us. But there are productive ways to manage that overwhelm, or you can engage in the, let's say it together, the Victim Olympics. Now, the effect of mental fatigue on group dynamics is pronounced because people massively underestimate group dynamics. Now, we reference this constantly, and we, it focuses on a large part on personalities as well. So for those of you suffering from fatigue, you've got to start making objective decisions. Otherwise, you'll begin to compromise situations. Particularly true in the group dynamic or a family unit. The farther in advance you can manage expectations, the better it is. So here's an example. Let's say your group starts to run around the clock security. All right, so you're running around the clock security. Everybody needs to be on guard for 45 minutes to 2 hours. Each person needs to take their turn. And in nearly every group situation, there is that one person who will make this challenging. Now, you can do your level best to coax that person around and get them on board. However, you might have to decide what is and isn't going to work. And forcing the issue will only compromise operational effectiveness. So you choose to take that person off duty because you don't trust their ability to engage properly. As soon as you take that person off duty, it sends a clear message to that person. It also sends a clear message to everyone in the group. However, if you force that person to perform security patrols when they are not engaged, there could be a compromise to the group's security. You see where we're going with this, right? So now the above example may be, it's a bit extreme. So let's take something as simple as cooking duties. The person who routinely cooks for the group has hit the point where they can no longer come up with 3 meals a day, every day. You might say something as simple as, take a day off. Quite often, all people need is what I refer to as a micro break and a little taste of normalcy. After a bit of pressure release, they bounce back and get back on board. In either situation, it's time for a judgment call. A solution is needed. Now, every one of us is susceptible to the poor little old me syndrome. The vast majority of us do not have a military-trained force clustered around us. Well, it depends. If you have people who have been in the military, there you go. That is going to pay dividends in the long run. And even if we did that, doesn't exempt us from these problems. Not all military branches are created equally. Not all service standards are created equally. Not all individuals are created equally. We will tire. We'll become fatigued and we will struggle. We may even indulge in some self-pity that would cause Nan to smack us. So you have to ask yourself, what are the situations that you can push, manage, improve, and grow? Then develop a model to negotiate across the entire group or family unit. Now remember, even if the group is accepting of those decisions, there are going to be consequences. Knowing when it's time to make objective decisions is often overlooked. When everybody's tired, fatigued, and struggling, and one person is struggling more than the others, the situation can become dangerous. So you've got to catch these issues early on and manage them, or managing them is going to be crucial. If you feel you don't have the management skills needed, make sure someone in your group does. Allocate that position to the person who is capable of this type of group management. You know, when we get tired, and I'm just talking about just mentally tired and physically tired, one, every little pain you have becomes magnified. When you become tired and fatigued, your decision-making process is not only slowed, but it can become flawed and generally does. Why do you think that the military wants 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds in the military? Because they can go for a long time without sleep. Don't believe me? Think back when you were that age. You could go out all night, party all night, get up and, go home, catch a couple hours, and you're back at work or school or doing whatever. No problem. Try that in your late 20s, early 30s. You're saying, oh, good God, does this ever end? No, it doesn't. So that's why you have to keep attention to it, all right? So have you or someone in your group been struggling with mental fatigue? Are you dealing with mental fatigue right now? I strongly suspect family units and large groups are tired and fatigued. Know that it is quite common. Many of you may think it's just you, but it's not. There are many others who are overwhelmed with it all and have indeed got a case of the plums. So let's reassure each other that we are not alone. Because that is what's really going to come about. I've often said before, because especially with the way, for those of us that have to engage in the toilet of the internet, social media, you feel like you're the only one out there fighting. You're not. And if you're in a group, you may have mental fatigue. You may say, you know what, I need a break. Now, for myself, I did a couple things. Last September, I left Facebook. I have not been on Facebook since, and you know what? My life has improved dramatically. I got friends, former co-workers, and family on Facebook. Guess what? You want to get a hold of me? You know my phone number. You know my email. Give me a call. Email me. Message me. I don't care. Whatever. Text me. I don't care. But I've become much more happier since I've been on Facebook. And you will too. Why any conservative, prepper, or patriot is still on Facebook is beyond me. And the excuse of, well, I got family and friends on Facebook. Fuck them. At some point in time, you got to draw the line and say, enough's enough. I'm not going to put myself out there just for you. Because the bottom line is this. You cannot take care of others until you take care of yourself first. That's that's just the fact. Now, where are we? Oh, yeah. So don't worry if you're feeling fatigued. Personally, I don't know why any group would be activated at this point. Now, at the beginning of this nonsense, I get it. Here we are over a year, almost a year and a half later, and we're still dealing with this nonsense. Most people aren't buying it. And most people are afraid to say anything because they don't want to be yelled at by somebody. You know what? I don't care. Yell at me, I'm going to yell back. Chastise me, I'm going to tell you to fuck off and die because I don't care. Why? Because I'm an asshole. Sorry if bad words offend you. If bad words are offending you, by all means, go back to mom's basement. Speaking of basement, yes, Lord Biden was having a climate change Zoom meeting with the Navajo Nation down in Arizona. And he blurts out, and it's like Biden blurts out, "Let my wife come home." It's like, what in the hell is he talking? I feel sorry for the Navajo Council. What do you say to those idiots? What do you say to that moron? Let my wife come home. What the hell are you talking about? It's like, but we have the mainstream media to thank for covering this guy's dementia. I tell you right now, if I was a Russian or the Chinese or the North Koreans, I'd be plotting to take advantage of the United States, and rightfully so. All right. Anyways, I'm getting crazy here. Hey, let me take a break here. I got to get some more coffee, as if I'm not already over caffeinated as it is. We'll be right back in about a minute.
Hello, this is Dave Kirshner from the Dave Kirshner Lightning Round podcast. Do you want to know more about what makes me tick beyond my books? Then go to my website at davidjkirshner.com. There you can read about my latest adventures on the blog, discover what books and websites I recommend, download my research papers, find the latest episode of the podcast, see spot pricing for precious metals, and much, much more. Or perhaps you want to contact me for advice, ask a question, or make a suggestion for the podcast or a blog post. Then go to the contact page on my website at davidjkirshner.com. Best of all, everything is free.
That's right. Hey, you know what? You can listen to Dave Kirshner right here on Contra Radio Network on the Lightning Round. He's written some few books. He's even got some books that you're going to need. You should have in your prepping library. They're resource books. I would suggest looking at them. His website's davidjkirshner.com. Okay, guys, preppers, patriots, listen up. It's been making the news the last couple days. I want to talk about what the Supreme Court has agreed to decide in the Second Amendment case from New York. All right. Now, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated versus Corlett, a major Second Amendment case that will address the question whether the state's denial of petitioners' applications for concealed carry licenses for self-defense violated the Second Amendment. Now, interestingly, that is not the question as posed in the petition. In the petition, the court was asked to answer the following question: whether the Second Amendment allows the government to prohibit ordinary, law-abiding citizens from carrying handguns outside the home for self-defense. Now, parsing these types of announcements from the court is an exercise in tea leaf reading. It seems to me, however, that the question as posed in the petition asks for an interpretation of the breadth of the Second Amendment's preemption of state regulation, whereas the question as reformulated by the court focuses on what New York has done and whether that act violates the Second Amendment. A question that can be answered without sweeping away all other state-imposed limitations on gun ownership and possession. The language, don't get me wrong, I think the Roberts Court is the worst Supreme Court I've ever seen in my lifetime. It is the absolute worst. And he will go down in history as probably one of the worst Chief Justices, and this court will go down as an absolute disaster, and it should be. So the language chosen by the court suggests a narrower analysis of the specific New York's firearm permitting process, and seems to focus on the specific applications made by the petitioners within the framework of the statutory limitations created by New York, going back to a point in time prior to the adoption of the Second Amendment. Now, interestingly, there is no meaningful lower court opinion that is the subject of the court's review in Corlett. So the record seems quite limited. The petitioners, originally the plaintiffs in the federal district court case, had their complaint dismissed by the district court on the basis that controlling precedent existed in the Second Circuit Court, since that court had already decided in 2012 on nearly identical facts that New York's regulatory processes did not violate the Second Amendment. And in that earlier case, which is Kachowski versus the County of Westchester, the Second Circuit was called upon to decide whether the Supreme Court's decision in District of Columbia versus Heller, by the way, that case came out of Chicago, required that the New York regulatory statutes be invalidated. In deciding Kachowski, The Second Circuit Court held that Heller concerned only an outright ban on gun ownership for handguns possessed in the home for self-defense purposes only. Because of the limited basis of the ruling, the Second Circuit held that broader questions of gun ownership and possession rights were left unresolved by Heller, and ultimately decided that the New York statute requiring a permitting process for carrying a concealed firearm out in the public for purposes of self-defense did not violate the Second Amendment. I know, it's ridiculous. The Second Circuit in Corlett issued only a brief order affirming the outcome in the district court on the basis that any other outcome would have been contrary to Kachowski, which remains good law. As a result, what the Supreme Court is really taking up for review is the Second Circuit opinion from Kachowski decided in 2012. That's 9 years ago. So as a general matter, the New York permitting statute requires an applicant to provide a reason, which is referred to as a proper cause, for wanting to carry a firearm outside the home. Now, common reasons offered include hunting, going to a gun range for target practice. A third recognized reason, constituting proper cause, is for purposes of self-defense. But in order to establish proper cause on the basis of self-defense, the applicant must demonstrate a special need for self-protection distinguishable from that of the general community or of persons engaged in the same profession. New York does not recognize a generalized right to self-defense as expressed in the Constitution through the Second Amendment. You know, this is coming down to a shall or may issue. The Kachowski court noted that the regulations in New York have many similarities to statutory provisions in many other states which have been upheld on Second Amendment challenges for decades. The court simply moved on from the past, and it simply moved on from and passed the Supreme Court's decision in Heller by noting that the proper cause provision in New York statute showed that there was no complete ban on firearms possession, as had been the case in Heller. Now, one issue that the court left unresolved in Heller that might be resolved in Corlett is the standard of review that lower courts should apply to state restrictions on firearm ownership and possession. Now, the court in Heller found that the complete ban on handgun possession under the D.C. statute would have failed any standard of review, so it was not necessary for the court to determine which standard would best apply. This involves the question of whether the statute under review should be subjected to strict scrutiny, rational basis, or some intermediate level of court review in evaluating the extent to which it burdens constitutional rights in pursuit of the governmental interest. Now, in Kachowski, the Second Circuit did not apply the most severe standard of review, which is strict scrutiny. Because the statute did not reach the core Second Amendment right identified by the Supreme Court in Heller, the right to possess a firearm for self-defense in one's home. Deciding the applicable standard of review, particularly if the court decides that strict scrutiny is the proper standard, would then be a basis to send the case back to the Second Circuit without addressing the foundational issue of how broad are the protections afforded by the Second Amendment. It would also cause a likely reset of other cases recently decided or currently pending in other circuit courts. A decision establishing the standard of review would rewrite the rules in a meaningful fashion on how lower courts should evaluate state restrictions on gun ownership and possession. Now, such a reset of lower court cases would allow the Supreme Court to again put off resolving the more controversial issues about how far the Second Amendment should reach in prohibiting state regulations of firearms. You know, the Supreme Court's been dancing around this issue for decades. It's like, get it together, people. Figure it out and be done with it. That doesn't mean you can't revisit it later, but come on. How many times we got to keep going through this nonsense? Earlier I said this was a may or shall issue. You say, John, what are you talking about? It's pretty simple. The law in some states and not in others use the word shall or may. For example, how about the Constitution, Second Amendment? Shall not be infringed. Shall means that's the way it is. It's concrete. If it said it may be infringed, that's the kind of loophole, leak in the dike type thing. Well, some states, we may issue a permit, or we shall issue a permit. I think we've seen, for example, gun control does not work. It doesn't. Don't believe me? Fine, don't. Look at Chicago. The city of Chicago is one of the strictest gun controls in the country. But yet, every weekend, every day, people being shot. By each other, not by the police. By the way, it reminds me, was it the 2019 Uniform Crime Reports? I should have looked it up before the show. The media would have you believe the police are massacring black people. Thousands a year. They're massacring thousands of black people a year. The FBI's Uniform Crime Reports, which is data-driven, I think it was 2018, 2019. I think that was maybe the last year the data's available. Show that 27 unarmed black people were shot and killed by police. 27. Not the hundreds, not the thousands. The issue is this, my friends, and it confronts us every day. There is always going to be people out there who will drive an issue from an emotional perspective. It's an emotional perspective. And they drive that, and they want you to get involved emotionally with it. They don't want you to use your intellect, think about what is actually being said. That doesn't mean that their emotions are wrong. What it means is, most of the time, if you do this, all right, here, let me put it another way. Here's the spectrum. Emotions, and then you have your intellect, all right? These levels work inversely. For example, if you have high emotions, your rational and intellect are low. Conversely, if your emotions are in check, your intellect and rational thinking is high. And it's always going to be inversely proportional. Always. So when you're dealing with the leftists, especially the mainstream media, very often they will edit a story, they will change the context because they want to grab you emotionally into the story. And they want you that way. They want you invested emotionally. So you keep watching, or you keep giving money. What I'm saying is, don't get emotionally involved. You've got to drop your emotions. And generally what happens is, for example, prime example, is that trained SEAL LeBron James. We had that shooting over in, was it Cincinnati, over in Ohio? 13-year-old black girl. No one wants to see a 13-year-old girl shot and killed. No one does. No one wants to see that. But no one wants to see a 13-year-old girl stab another 13-year-old girl. No one wants that either. So, LeBron gets emotionally involved. He sees it, story goes out, in mainstream media, stoking the fire, getting you emotionally involved. Stoking it. Many in the mainstream media were caught editing the tape. So you don't see the 13-year-old girl with a knife getting ready to stick the other girl. LeBron sees it, gets emotionally involved, doxes the officer and says, "You're next." And then once the video starts getting around saying, wait a minute, here's the actual video. This is what the officer was facing. So the officer is faced with this issue. I have to shoot the 13-year-old girl with a knife in order to save the other 13-year-old girl's life. It's a defense of life issue. And because it is, and it's clear from the body cam footage, guess what? That's going to be a righteous shoot. Period. However, contrary to that shooting, the shooting up in Brooklyn Center, that is not going to be a righteous shoot. And that falls on the department. And unfortunately, falls on that officer or ex-officer. There's a difference between retired officers and ex-officers, okay? That issue is going to haunt Brooklyn Center PD and the city for a while, and it should, because, well, I went into it a couple episodes ago, look it up. But anyways, so LeBron gets all wrapped up in this emotional investment, and then actually, when people start saying, hey, moron, the intellect on some people say, wait a minute, the officer is facing this situation. Perhaps, let's put it this way. In the end, LeBron has to delete the tweet. He's got to eat crow as he should, And he's done this to himself. So the officer has to make a decision. Decision point. If I don't shoot this and stop this 13-year-old with a knife from stabbing an unarmed 13-year-old girl, if I don't shoot and she stabs that girl, yeah, she might die from the stab. Yeah, she might. She might not, though. She might survive it. And then we got to take another step. If I don't stop the stabbing, and there's another girl present, two girls, you got the first victim, almost victim, and you got a second one behind her. Is the person with the knife going to go after the next person? If that, these are, you have to look at possibly down the road. However, in defense of life, I know she's got a deadly weapon. She is intent on using it. I said, this will go down as a righteous shoot. I said, no one wants to see a 13-year-old child shot. No one does. But there are times and circumstances that sometimes you got to do what you have to do, and it sucks. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, that officer is going to have to live with that. Preppers, patriots, listen to me closely when I tell you this. This is important. And if you don't know it, I'm going to tell it to you. Whenever someone takes another person's life, what you've done, not only to, in that person's life, you've taken away everything they were, everything they are, and everything they will be. That's the truth of the matter. And it's a heavy burden. I said, that officer is going to have to live with that for the rest of his life. That officer in Minnesota, in Brooklyn Center, she's going to have to live with that for the rest of her life. When you become a police officer, that is the burden you are agreeing to take on should that situation ever occur. That's the bottom line. Now, during my 26 years as a deputy, I never heard one of my coworkers say, I'm going to go out and kill somebody today. Never, ever heard it. Never. In fact, I saw sometimes where I was the cover officer and the primary deputy on the scene, he handled it much differently than I would. That doesn't mean he's wrong, but maybe he chose to use a different level of force, if force at all. That's what I'm talking about. So anyways, they want you to become emotionally invested. That's why Democrats and the left always jump immediately to the emotional response. They want you emotionally invested over and over and over again. And then, of course, when you have conservatives who say, wait a minute, let's go back and take a look. That's the intellect saying, wait. Stop. But by that time, it's too late. And the media has moved on to some other emotionally investable story or incident. All right. All right, my friends. I want you to have an American day. Have an American week. Yes, by all means. All right. Superintelligentsia, thanks for joining us on the Power Lead System. Don and I appreciate it. If you didn't listen to the marketing podcast that we just published the other day, do so. You'll like it. There's many more people working from home now more than ever before. This tool can help you. All right, then. Unless something really crazy happens, which I'm sure it will because of who we got running the country, it's just a matter of days. If it's really worth my time coming in, I will. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Please have an American day. Have a good one. We'll talk to you then. Bye.